When Margaret and Robbins Barstow retired in 1985, they seized the moment to join a tour group and to fulfill a lifelong dream of visiting the great Far Eastern country of China, now that the new republic was once again becoming open to the West. From their Wethersfield front yard, they envisaged themselves on the Li River, with the mystical rock peaks towering behind them as shown on the cover of their favorite National Geographic book about China. Do dreams come true? Well, here are Meg and Robbins at that very spot, just 4 weeks later. We would like now to share with you this exciting adventure. China is the third largest country in the world, next only to Russia and Canada. Living within its borders are more than 1 billion people, nearly 1/4 of all the humans on our planet. Two great rivers, the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze River in the south, wind across the country. Our Far Eastern trip began at the John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City, where a giant Northwest Orient Airlines jet was waiting to fly us from New York northwest to the Orient. We had a smooth flight above the clouds over Lake Huron, Canada, and Alaska, and then across the international dateline over the Pacific Ocean, and after 15 hours in the air, we landed at the Tokyo International Airport for a brief stopover in Japan. From there, we flew on to the conglomerate city of Hong Kong for a one-day rest before proceeding to mainland China itself. Hong Kong is a special territory located on the southeast coast of China, on an island administered by the British since 1842. An international port and trading center, the island now is covered with modern high-rise office buildings. Treaties provide for the return of the territory's governance to China in 1997. From our hotel room we could see the mountains of mainland China looming in the distance. Hong Kong has long been a primary port of entry for visitors to China. As shown on this map, we were to fly from Hong Kong in the south directly to Shanghai, midway up the east coast of China. Excitement filled the evening air as we boarded a China Airlines plane at the Hong Kong airport and took off for China proper and the fabled city of Shanghai. As we began our tour of the city the following morning, we found a large, colorful poster extending "Welcome to Shanghai" greetings in both Chinese and English. Shanghai is China's largest city and a major industrial, commercial, and educational center. This view from the top of a 9-story hotel overlooks the central part of the city and the extensive People's Park. Located near the mouth of the Yangtze or Changjiang River, Shanghai was forcibly opened by the British to foreign trade in 1842, and an international settlement known as the Bund grew up along the waterfront. Still one of the world's leading ports, Shanghai's harbor, emptying into the East China Sea, is a favorite visiting place for overseas travelers and Chinese children alike. To help introduce us to this ancient, modern city, we were fortunate to have a Chinese student guide named Ginny and an old Wethersfield friend, Elizabeth Oliver, who was then living and teaching in Shanghai. This imposing old building on the Bund is now the headquarters of the Chinese Communist Municipal Government. In the center of the old part of the city is a small rectangular lake with a famous tea house in the center. Leading to this ancient 5-sided tea house pavilion is a bridge of 9 right-angled turnings. Zigzagged, it is said, because evil spirits cannot go around corners. Here is a typical municipal housing project in a crowded urban neighborhood. Almost always, it seemed, our China City tours included a visit to a local kindergarten, where some of the students seemed to enjoy having their pictures taken as much as the tourists enjoyed recording their smiling faces and animated movements. There is something uniquely universal about young children everywhere. Thoughts of early childhood were, in fact, among the reasons we most wanted to visit China, because it was here in Shanghai that Margaret was actually born. On the grounds of the suburban guest house where our China group tour was staying, Meg explained why the next day was such a special one for her.
I'm Margaret Vanderbeek Barstow, and this is a really exciting day for me. September 8th, 1985, and we're here in Shanghai, China. My mother came here many years ago to teach at Bridgman School for Girls, and she met my father, who was the Dean of Engineering at the Nanyang Government College. They were married, and I was born in 1921. With my husband Robbins, we're having a great adventure trying to find the actual house where I was born.
Meg had brought with her the original Chinese document certifying her birth.
A certificate which shows the actual street and number. And we have an old map of Shanghai which shows the street here. And a new map of present Shanghai, where we're going to find it here. And here's the actual picture of the house. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we found it? It used to be Nanyang University, but it's changed to Chiao-Tung University.
Oh, it's very famous university.
You still have it here.
Yeah, famous for building shipment. Okay.
Building ships.
Yeah, building ships.
Very,
okay. Yeah, it's very famous. I think.
Yeah.
On that day, Meg and I separated from our tour group and joined our Wethersfield friend Elizabeth Oliver and our student guide Ginny to seek out the famous Chiao-Tung University. We hired a taxi to drive us through the bicycle and pedestrian crowded streets of the city. There were practically no private cars until we found the street on which the former Nanyang College was located. It was very exciting to have come this far and to see the street sign Huashan Lu, or Huashan Avenue. We had to walk only a short distance down the street until we came to the entranceway to the university grounds. Just inside there was a large map of the campus.
It's wonderful to have Elizabeth Oliver from Wethersfield here, and Jenny, a student, and they're helping us find my house. What we want to do is find where this house is on that map.
Oh, yeah, that's a map of Chiao-Tung University, Nanyang College.
As we walked around the campus, we found there was a large central quadrangle with university buildings on all four sides, just as described in Meg's father's diary, except that now, in the center of the quadrangle, there was a large statue of the Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong. We finally found two university employees who recognized the building in Meg's photo. Jenny asked them in Chinese if it was still standing.
这种房子过去是南洋公学的，现在还在不在这个地方？
这房现在拆了，
拆掉了。
现在拆了以后就造教师活动中心，是一个美国华侨捐助的钱。
你叫你瑶瑶的，就我刚才这房。
这房拆掉了，楼了，拆掉了。
Sorry.
It turned out that that old building had been torn down just the previous year, and a new modern building erected on its site.
Okay, now this is where this building used to be, and now, yeah, they built this new building last year, sponsored by an overseas Chinese.
Oh.
And now it's the teacher center.
The teacher center now. Well, that's very appropriate.
Yeah.
We're interested in education.
But anyway, it's
good use.
It's where you were born.
There it is. We have found it.
Yeah, only the building is.
The architecture of this building is very similar to the house where I was born, and it being right next to the other house, it's very interesting to see it, isn't it?
It certainly is. I'll bet your father lectured in this building.
Wouldn't that have been something?
Right up in that
Right,
room.
maybe that room up there.
Yes.
Dear, at last you have found your roots, the place of your birth, and it's a place that combines the old and the new,
That's
just
right.
as your parents did and your life has, and we hope our children's lives will. And may China take the best of the old and the new and keep both of them.
I hope so too.
After thus successfully finding the place of Meg's birth, the two of us rejoined our China tour group, and the next day we all took the train, the primary means of mass transit in China, for a 2-hour ride to the city of Suzhou. Passing the rice fields and rivers, we could soon understand why this area is known as the land of fish and rice. Suzhou is a picturesque city noted for its canals and gardens. For hundreds of years, the town has been home to some of the finest specimens of classical gardens ever created. Our favorite was the garden of the Master of the Nets, with a network of masterfully arranged walkways combining the 4 basic elements of rocks, water, plants, and architecture into a uniquely pleasing setting for all visitors to enjoy. Here also we saw a towering temple pagoda, 9 stories high, each level bringing the worshiper closer to heaven. After another delicious Chinese luncheon, the tour bus drove our group to the outskirts of Suzhou for what would prove to be one of the most memorable experiences of our entire trip, a 3-hour boat cruise on a section of the Grand Canal. China's Grand Canal ranks with the Great Wall as one of the world's greatest man-made wonders. Extending for over 1,000 miles, it links Beijing in the north with Hangzhou in the south through an interconnected series of canal channels, rivers, and lakes. The section we traveled from Suzhou to Wuxi is filled with commerce of all kinds, boats and cargoes of every description passing up and down the canal as it flows through cities, villages, and rural areas alike. This cruise provided the ultimate China experience, with an endless variety of living vignettes along the banks and on the boats as we passed. Traveling along the canal offers visitors scenery in motion and an incomparable close-up view of local customs and habits, with people of all ages going about their daily lives on both sides of this busy waterway or passing overhead on its numerous bridges. It was truly exhilarating to exchange waves and smiles along the way, whether on boat or on shore, and to feel these simple universal signs of warmth and friendship bridging the gap between 2 very different cultures. Wuxi is located at the edge of a large lake, Lake Tai, and we also took a boat trip across this lake. This was quite a different kind of cruise, with little boat traffic, except for frequent Chinese sailboats known as junks, fishing in tandem. The 2 vessels would string out a long net between them in the shape of a giant U, and then they would jointly harvest whatever fish they could catch in this big net trailing between the 2 junks. Some families live all year round on boats like this on the lake. Closer to shore, muscle power was the necessary means of locomotion for many smaller boats. We marveled at the strength and skill displayed by these oarsmen. Also at one edge of the lake we observed a farm for white geese. The city of Wuxi was another important place in Margaret Barstow's early childhood. Her family had moved here from Shanghai when she was 1 year old, so visiting this city provided another opportunity for her to search out her roots. Our hotel overlooked Lake Tai, where there was a picturesque little lakeside pavilion and also a small, exquisite, peace-instilling pagoda extending out over the water. Once again, we 2 Barstows split from the tour group for half a day. We hired a taxi to see if we could find the site of the technical high school which Meg's father had helped to establish in Wuxi in 1922. The streets were so crowded with bicycles here that often a separate lane was reserved for them. Our son David and his wife Linda had visited here the year before, and their map from that visit helped our taxi driver find the place in the outskirts where the school had been located. When we finally found the entranceway to the property shown on an old painted map that Meg had of the school grounds, a small crowd gathered around, and Meg tried to explain why she had come here.
My sister Betty and I were born in Shanghai, but we moved to Wuxi when I was about a year old, and now we've found the place. Now, this is the place where I lived those 3 years, and we hope we can find it again. I lived here 1922 to 1925. My father was a teacher.
Your father is a teacher?
Teacher. Here.
Meg showed them some actual photos taken of her when she lived here as a child.
How old? I was 1 year. 1 year. 2 years. 3 years. 4 years.
Go ahead.
At 4 years, I went to America with my parents. Now I am 64, and I come back.
You are her husband?
That my husband came with me. My husband.
I am her husband. I'm the person that came with Margaret Vanderbeek Barstow to Wuxi.
We learned from a man and a woman who spoke some English that the school was no longer in operation. But we still wanted to find the site of the house Meg had lived in there 60 years earlier. A whole crowd of curious, excited residents, young and old, followed us along like the Pied Piper. It appeared that this area was now used for a hospital and for a housing project with multi-family apartments. We finally located one of the old buildings shown on Meg's map, and we talked with a lady who lived in it.
Our son was here last year and came to here. Are you in this picture? Where are you? Are you in the picture? Is she in the picture? My son wanted me to give this to you.
The actual house that Meg's family had lived in was no longer standing, but this building was right next to where it had been. So the return of the American lady who had lived here as a child so long ago was good cause for neighborhood celebration. Meg gave out little balloons to all the children, and we took Polaroid photos, which we also distributed to everyone's delight. We left with warm-hearted memories, both old and new. When the sun set on this big day, it was time for a final contemplation of these Wuxi experiences, looking silently out over beautiful Lake Tai. For the next part of our journey, we were going to fly all the way north to Beijing, the capital of China, where, among other things, we would visit the Great Wall, which extended across the northern part of the country as shown here in a jagged blue line. Since 1949, the flag of the People's Republic of China has been bright red with a large gold star symbolizing the communist ideal of progress for all, flanked by 4 smaller stars of people all working together. Before following this flag to Beijing, however, we were to take one more bus trip around the Shanghai region. Like all China tours, ours had been arranged through the auspices of the government's China International Travel Service. Back home in Wethersfield, through our local Welcome Aboard travel agency, we had signed up with a particular tour group known as Pacific Delight.
Belafonte, this is a group. You've got 30 Americans from all over the United States going on this special 24-day Pacific Delight Tour China experience. How is it set up?
Well, it is really set up by the company. I'm the tour director. My job is really a troubleshooter, make sure that everything runs smoothly. and that the passengers receive all that has been promised to them by the travel brochures. Now, I accompany the tour from A1. Also, the CITS, which is China International Travel Service, appoints a national guide, and this is Liang, a national guide here, and maybe we can introduce her.
Yeah, my name is Liang. I'm from Guilin, and now I'm the representative of the headquarters of the CITS. Now, this time, I stay with the group all the way through every city. Every city we go, we have the local guide, and the local guide will take us around in the local cities. Here's our local guide.
And what's the special name you've given to this group?
Oh, this group has been just wonderful. So I've named them Panda, Ram's Pandas.
Great.
And
that makes you the Panda Man.
That makes me Papa Panda.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Our bus tour this day was to include a variety of experiences in and around the city of Hangzhou, renowned for the beauties of its countryside, the modernity of its urban center and municipal buildings, and the intellectual, cultural, and recreational offerings associated with its nearby vacation attraction, West Lake. In the main city square, there's a spectacular fountain with flowing sculptures celebrating the arts of music and dance. Out in the countryside, we visited the Lingyin Monastery and walked along a picturesque hillside path with caves and carvings in the rocks beside a stream. Here we saw one of the very few statues portraying a laughing Buddha. Another memorable sight was the water-spewing dragon's head at a rural cultural center known as Yellow Dragon Well. Here we were privileged to see and hear costumed performers present a program of song and drama at an outdoor theater among rocks and pools in 2 roofed pavilions. We heard opera renditions and a concert played on ancient Chinese instruments. We could not help but admire the beautiful gowns of the musicians and hostesses. Another tour stop was at the astonishing Pagoda of 6 Harmonies, a massive structure containing 13 stories, overlooking the famous West Lake, one of China's most popular vacation paradises. West Lake has a variety of attractions, including lovely garden walks and parks and pools, where a favorite pastime is feeding the goldfish. There is a large island in the middle of West Lake, and we crossed over to it in a shuttle boat. On the way, we passed several of the golden carved dragon vessels used by honeymooners as pleasure boats. On the island, I queried our local Chinese guide.
What town is it?
This is Hangzhou.
Now, what island are we on here?
3 towers reflecting the moon. And this island is famous for the island in the lake and the lakes within the island. In this island, we can see 2 dikes, which divide the island into 4 parts and 4 small lakes.
Both human structures and nature's bounty give rise to colorful names for particular locales here, such as orioles singing in the willows, and this crossing the rainbow's bridge. Before the day ended, our group also visited a tea farm, formerly known as a commune, but now referred to as a township. Almost everyone living in this small rural community worked at cultivating, picking, and processing tea. It takes great skill to pluck just the right tender, tiny tea leaf at just the right time. The tea grown here and carefully harvested by the season was the highly regarded specialty Dragon Well Tea. The township was largely self-contained and very much family-oriented. We were able to talk with a number of the residents about their communal life here, and even to visit in their apartment homes. The township has its own school, and again, we had the fun of looking in on a couple of classes and hearing the children recite and sing. Of course, we also had to take a lot of photos on the schoolhouse steps. I found that everyone liked having instant Polaroid pictures taken, so I gave them to the teachers. It was quite obvious that some of the pupils were more interested in having their picture taken than in shaking hands. Oh well. We greatly enjoyed this brief personal contact with such warm, friendly, and hard-working people. The classic sight of 3 generations smiling together here made a deep and lasting impression on all of us. The next day, we eagerly awaited our flight north to Beijing from an airport outside Hangzhou. This time, we were to travel on a Chinese military charter plane being utilized for tourist groups. We had a smooth ride above the clouds and were met at a small tourist airport outside Beijing by the 2 young women who would serve as our local guides in the Beijing area. Our American tour leader, Ram, was very happy to be joined by such an attractive and vivacious pair. A bus shuttled us into Beijing, past older buildings, to the fabulous new Great Wall Hotel, where we were to stay for 3 nights. This was one of the most luxurious and richly designed edifices we had ever been in. It had opened just the year before, built largely for foreign visitors, and was 21 stories high with mirrored glass panels encasing its exterior, and inside the lobby a 6-story atrium with mirrored pillars and glass-fronted elevators. This is the view which greeted us from our 13th floor window, overlooking the fountained courtyard and offering a panoramic view of Beijing in the distance. Outside the hotel, our 2 local guides introduced themselves at the start of our first day's trip.
Hello, welcome to Beijing, the capital of the People's Republic of China. Let me introduce myself. My name is Zhang.
And my name is Jia, and also my English name is called Betty. Yeah, and we will serve you as the tourist guides during your 3-day stay in Beijing.
Okay, here is a pen as a souvenir. The design on it are 2 flags. One is an American flag and one is a Chinese flag. Yeah, it represents friendship between the 2 people of our 2 countries. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, they're welcome. Yeah.
I'll wear it.
Yeah.
Again, we boarded our chartered bus for our first sightseeing day in Beijing. This capital city, with its ancient inner core and extensive outer suburbs, encompasses a vast area. One of the first things that impressed us about present-day Beijing was its network of modern superhighways, wide avenues, giant cloverleafs, and high-rise office buildings. With a population of over 6 million people, second only to Shanghai, it is not only China's political and educational center, but a primary commercial and industrial base as well. On the way to the heart of the city, our group made a special stop at the Beijing Zoo. Since he had bestowed on us the nickname of the Pandas, our leader, Ram, wanted to be sure that we actually saw some real live pandas, even though in captivity here. This critically endangered species of wildlife is native only to China, and there are thought to be less than 1,000 giant pandas left now in the entire world. China has been making special efforts to try to prevent their imminent extinction. Beijing strikingly encompasses both new and old. 6 centuries of dynastic emperors ruled from behind the walls of a central forbidden city. But then the revolutionary governments of 20th century China symbolized change by creating a tremendous open public square, the largest in the world. This is Tiananmen Square, a huge plaza stretching widely across this vast paved open space. to face the old palace wall on the north.
This is Tiananmen Square. It has an area of 14 light hectares. It is big enough to hold 1 million people in China. This is the monument to the people's hero. And behind the monument to the people's hero is Chairman Mao's Memorial Hall. It was built in 1977.
Mao Zedong was the powerful revolutionary leader of the Chinese Communists who finally achieved victory for them in 1949 and ruled the new China till his death in 1976. This heroic sculpture on the plaza honors all the workers, farmers, and other common people who gave so much for their country. The monumental Great Hall of the People is where national assemblies are held. It was here in Tiananmen Square in 1989 that the government tragically suppressed student-led pro-democracy demonstrations. Beyond the wall with Mao's giant portrait on it, however, lies an unbelievable world of the past. Even an aerial panorama can scarcely convey the overwhelming immensity of the endless palaces, pavilions, and courtyards within what was formerly known as the Forbidden City. Surrounded by an ancient moat and literally miles of towering red brick walls, this incredible conclave was for 6 centuries the exclusive world of China's emperors. Now open for everyone to visit, it was called the Forbidden City because any outsider entering its grounds without permission was immediately put to death. Now being preserved as a museum of the palace, the acres and acres of 15th century halls, pavilions, statues, and ornate stone stairways contain an unimaginable wealth of artistic and architectural treasures. One after another, one mounts the stairs and passes through a great pavilion onto a vast courtyard, and then continues through the next palace building onto an even vaster courtyard. Each structure has a high-sounding traditional name related to its royal purpose, as pointed out by our megaphone-wielding guide.
This is the Hall of Supreme Harmony. It is the Throne Hall, built in 1420 in the Ming Dynasty.
It was in these fantastically opulent surroundings that successive generations of emperors lived almost their entire lives with their families, wives, concubines, court officials, and countless servants, and all kinds of divertissements to satisfy their wants, totally isolated from the great masses of people outside whose exploitation made possible their privileged, secluded existence. Contrasting the wealth and artistic opulence of the ruling few so conspicuously displayed here with what must have been the abject poverty of the general populace, one could understand how it was that early in our present century whirlwinds of rebellion shook the land and overthrew the tyrant emperors. 2 lions traditionally guard Chinese entranceways with a ball under the right foot of the male and a small cub being fed milk through the claws on the female's left foot.
Okay, here used to be the living rooms for the concubines to live. At that time, the emperor had many concubines. How many, I don't know.
Finally leaving behind us the Forbidden City, we next visited, aspiring to heavenly heights, one of the most beautiful architectural masterpieces ever created, the magnificent, great, blue-tiled Temple of Heaven. Built in the 15th century without using a single nail, its 3-tiered, cone-shaped roof is supported by 28 huge wooden columns. Reportedly, once every year, the emperor was carried here to this perfectly symmetrical temple hall to pray for good harvests. It is still a place of supreme awe and worship. From this beauty spot, we traveled out into the countryside northwest of the city to see the other home of latter-day emperors, the Summer Palace. This was like a fantastic vacation resort made especially for the royal family and its extensive retinue. It included a monumental temple of Buddhist virtue. On the top of what was known as Longevity Hill, after climbing the long flights and countless stairs crisscrossing its side, we realized why it had this name. If you managed to make it all the way to the top, you indeed had lived a long life. The view over the rooftops to Kunming Lake was spectacular, with a 15-arch bridge in the distance. One of the most hated excesses of the last empress was a costly marble boat which never could leave its dock. Now, all of this is for tourists, native and foreign. Our last day in Beijing was to be our most memorable. Out our hotel window we could see bicyclists on their way to work. As our bus began its 2-hour journey, we passed some new 6-story apartment houses, so designed because buildings with less than 7 stories are not required to have elevators. As we got further out in the country, we saw a variety of local modes of transportation. Our first stop was in the hills northwest of Beijing, where the Ming emperors are buried. The road to their tombs is guarded by an avenue of great stone animals. Everyone, foreign and domestic alike, wanted their picture taken beside one of the animals. The different animals are all in pairs, one standing and one kneeling. Legend has it that at midnight they change positions so that the standing one gets a chance to rest. The actual tombs of the Ming emperors are located deep underground through this entranceway. And now we are about to get our first glimpse of today's main objective, the monumental Great Wall of China. The Great Wall is the only man-made structure on Earth clearly discernible by astronauts from outer space. It's the largest engineering and construction project ever carried out by humans, extending on mountain ridges across northern China for some 2,000 miles. Most of it is now in disrepair, but a section near Badaling has been marvelously restored, and this is where we began our climb from the large tourist center at the base of one valley. Meg and I elected to go up the steep left-hand slope of the wall, and it should be clearly understood that climbing the Great Wall really does mean to climb. The roadway on top of the wall is wide enough for 4 horses or 8 men to march abreast. Along the way there are lookout platforms and watchtowers where one can catch one's breath and gaze in awesome wonder at the tremendous magnitude of this highway in the hills. Truly, this is no easy climb. Parts of it are extremely steep, sometimes with a smooth, slippery surface, and sometimes with high, irregular stone steps. But if one keeps at it until one finally reaches the peak, the reward is an incomparable view of this great ribbon of wall winding around and up and down over the hillsides as far as the eye can see. The main sections of the wall go back more than 2,000 years to 200 BC, when the emperor who united early China ordered a connected line of walls to be constructed to protect the country from marauding invaders from the north. It was built at a tremendous cost in human lives, but today joyous Chinese tourists find great pride and exhilaration in experiencing this supremely impressive part of their heritage, as we did also. Going down, Robbins followed the lead of some young Chinese men in sliding down the metal railing along the side. Back at the base, not far from this 2-humped exhibition camel, we again found our bus for the return trip to our Beijing hotel.
Well, the 15th of September, 1985 has been a red-letter day for us in our Great China experience. Congratulations, Meg, you climbed the Great Wall.
Congratulations, Rob, you climbed the Great Wall.
We did it together.
We climbed it together.
Another shared summit adventure.
The remainder of our China trip would take us by plane south from Beijing to the inland town of Xian, and then further south to the Yangtze River at Chongqing, where we would board a boat for a 5-day cruise along the river to Wuhan. From there we would fly south again to Guilin and then finally leave China by way of Hong Kong. The flight on a large jet plane from Beijing down to Xian, which is spelled Xian, took less than 2 hours. We found this ancient city deep in the interior of China to be much less sophisticated and cosmopolitan than Shanghai and Beijing. We were taken by bus through a gate in the city wall to a brand new luxury tourist hotel, the Golden Flower, which had just been erected and opened to cope with the overwhelming influx of recent tourists caused by one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in history, a whole army of life-size terracotta figures which had literally been buried underground near Xian, totally unknown for more than 2,000 years. We encountered intermittent rain on the day of our excursion to the site where the pottery warriors had been entombed, but it was an incredible experience. China's first unifying emperor, Qin Shi Huang, who had also built the Great Wall, was known to have had his tomb set on this hillside outside Xian when he died in 210 BC. What was not known until 1974 was that before he died, he had conscripted thousands of artisans and laborers to create for his protection in the afterlife and bury forever at this spot about a mile from his own tomb an unbelievable array of thousands of terracotta soldiers, horses, and chariots. A giant roofed museum has now been built to preserve these figures.
It's the terracotta figures inside the great building, representing the guardian army of a dead emperor whose name was Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi.
How many figures?
There are totally 6 life-size warriors and horses inside the vault.
When was it built?
It was built in 250 BC.
Okay.
Inside the building, the sight is indescribable, of rows upon rows of realistic life-size figures covering acres of dugouts, each figure having been individually sculpted with minutely differentiated details of dress and facial expression. At the time of our visit, it was reported that over 7,000 armored warriors, 600 clay horses, and 100 chariots had already been uncovered, and more were being excavated all the time. This is a small copy of just one of the thousands of unique individual pottery sculptures. Outside, there's a life-size reproduction of one of the clay horses, a favorite spot for family photos. It is absolutely amazing that this tremendous treasure trove of artwork going back to 200 years before Christ was entirely lost to the world until it was accidentally discovered in 1974 by farmers digging a well. From Xian, we flew south again to Chongqing, a mountainous industrial city set on a rocky promontory at the juncture of the Guilin and Yangtze rivers. A cable car across the Guilin River connects its 2 sides. The streets are so steep leading up to the city's central square that there are practically no bicycles here. We were not proud to see that the local theater was showing an American-made Rambo movie. Chongqing figured prominently as a military headquarters here during World War II in the Chinese struggle to drive out their Japanese invaders. It also was an important center for the communists after the war. This building served as a meeting place for Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai in planning for the eventual communist government takeover in 1949. We frequently observed with admiration this traditional Chinese method for carrying heavy loads. We had another opportunity to see giant pandas at the zoo in Chongqing, which is located in Sichuan province, where most of the few remaining wild pandas live. Unfortunately, captive breeding programs have so far had little success. There's quite an artist colony in Chongqing, and when we visited this Chongqing Institute of Chinese Painting, we were able to make a very special purchase.
We just watched the artist painting this picture. It's of the 3 gorges of the Yangtze River, and in a couple of days we'll be seeing the gorges ourselves.
Chongqing was the embarkation point for our long-anticipated cruise down the Yangtze River for 850 miles, including the famous Three Gorges. This 65-passenger river cruise boat, appropriately named Three Gorges, was to be our home for 5 days and nights. We departed early on a misty morning and agreed that it was only right to call the river by its Chinese name, Shanghai, rather than the formally imposed English name, Yangtze.
The name of this river?
Formerly the Yangtze River, but most of them told it Changjiang River.
It's the longest river in China and the third longest in the world, I know. How long is it in miles?
4,000 miles.
And where did we go on this cruise?
From Chongqing here to Wuhan.
Exceeded in length only by the Nile and the Amazon, the Yangtze River flows from the mountains of Tibet all the way across China to the East China Sea, just north of Shanghai. The tremendous volume of its water has made the river an unparalleled life-sustaining force and a major avenue of commerce. Nearly half of China's agricultural output is grown within its basin. It has also been the cause of devastating floods. Proceeding peacefully down the river, we passed meadows and mountains, forests and farmers, and occasional villages crowded along its shores. We disembarked in the rain at one river town, being ferried ashore in small boats, and then being provided with large black umbrellas. Despite the wetness, we made our way up the slope and through a narrow, crowded marketplace where we had the opportunity to exchange silent greetings with venerable Chinese villagers. Some of us even climbed up to a Buddhist temple built high on the top of a giant rock overlooking the river, where we enjoyed the misty view from the round window of a small pagoda. Actually, it was raining through most of our cruise, but the boat had a cozy lounge, the dining room meals were an excellent mix of both Chinese and Western food, and the scenes and scenery along the river and shore were endlessly fascinating, made even more dramatic and beautiful by the clouds and mist surrounding the peaks and the tall cliffs that created the gorges. Each of the gorges we passed through was spectacular in its own way, and left us awed at what God had wrought here. On the third day of our cruise, after leaving the last of the gorges, we came to the locks and giant dam of the Gajoba project at Yichang City. The locks here have one of the highest displacement levels in the world. Our boat was lowered more than 30 feet in one lock. The Gajoba Dam was the first to be built across the Yangtze River and is a monumental engineering achievement. The mud-colored waters rushing down its sluiceways provide tremendous amounts of power for electricity, flood control, irrigation, and navigation.
About halfway between the dam and Wuhan is Lake Dongting, now China's second largest lake and formerly a home to the Chinese river dolphin. The city of Wuhan is the site of the first bridge to be built across the Yangtze River and also of the first giant television tower in China. It was here at Wuhan that we secured permission to make a personal visit to the Institute of Hydrobiology, a campus of Wuhan University, some miles out from the center of the city. Here we were introduced to Professor Chen and several of her colleagues, who are now recognized as the foremost authorities in the world on the Chinese river dolphin. And in a large pool inside this well-guarded, roof-covered enclosure, we found being maintained alive and well the only living specimen of a Chinese river dolphin existing in captivity any place in the world today. It was a rare and fascinating sight. This animal had been obtained 5 years ago in January 1980 from some river fishermen who had caught it alive in a pool of shallow water near a sandbank. It had been severely wounded by hooks during capture and required very special care for some months after it had been taken to the Hydrobiology Institute. It was treated with Chinese medicines until the wounds finally healed, and since then it has gained weight and remained healthy and active. Among the playthings placed in the pool with the dolphin from time to time is a floating rubber tube, which it sometimes, of its own accord, picks up with its dorsal fin and pulls around the pool. Now here is Professor Chen and Mr. Ren Jun.
This dolphin is reported in the Yangtze River of China, only in the north and the middle.
What is the name of this dolphin?
This dolphin name is Chi.
And where did you catch it?
We caught it in 1980 and catch it in the Yangtze River nearby Dongding Lake.
I understand it's the
only one in the world in captivity.
That's remarkable.
We treat it to use Chinese medicine for 1 year. He is healed.
Chi is a male Chinese river dolphin. Bioacoustical studies have been made of its echolocation abilities during feeding because, like other river dolphins, its eyesight appears to be extremely limited.
An international workshop to seek ways to preserve and protect the Chinese river dolphin was held here in Wuhan in 1986. It is still hoped that though there are now maybe fewer than 100 of these rare animals still in existence, some way can be found to prevent their actual extinction. The final major destination of our China Odyssey, to which we flew from Wuhan, was Guilin, that mystical place of river and mountains that has uniquely inspired Chinese artists for thousands of years. Located in the southern lowlands, the landscape of Guilin is an incomparable flower in the garden of nature. Outside the city, the Li River provides the setting for what has been called the most enchanting and breathtaking scenery any place in the world. The water buffalo is the most valued beast of burden in cultivating the rice fields which cover the ground like an exquisite quilt in this classic scene of China's rural beauty. A Li River boat ride has become the ultimate dream for the throngs of tourists who flock here from around the world and are rarely allowed to depart without a souvenir remembrance. Meg bought a large woven basket hat. We waited our turn to board one of the many cruise ships which take passengers on a leisurely, peaceful, rapturous 3-hour trip down the river. The peculiar topography traces back some 300 million years when the region was a seabed with a thick overlay of limestone. Through crustal movement, the seabed thrust up and the layers of limestone, eroded by water and wind, formed an expanse of land marked by these majestic hills in various shapes and sizes. We saw many of these domesticated animals along the riverbank, feeding both on land and in the water. This is why they are called water buffalo. I found them very interesting to watch, comparing them with cattle in a field or stream back home in New England. The distinctive karst formations of jutting limestone peaks make this a photographer's paradise, despite the occasional distraction of sighting buffalo calves. We saw a number of fishing boats on the side of the river, many of them using live cormorants on a leash to catch fish. What a feast this was for everyone's eyes and soul. We were all very sure that this must be the very same boatman shown on the cover of the National Geographic book, Journey into China. At the end, to wrap up our fantastic journey, we made one final stop at the ever-present Friendship store.
Meg, what a marvelous Barstow travel adventure this China experience has been.
It's been wonderful exploring my own roots in China, as well as seeing the mingling of past and present, East and West.
As we bring our China adventure to a close, I'd like to express a wish which we've heard expressed a number of times on this trip, and that is that all the people on earth may learn to know each other as friends and to live together in peace.
We hope you've enjoyed this Barstow travel adventure film. We'll be releasing more of Robbins Barstow's home movies on this YouTube channel during 2021. Click here to subscribe and receive the latest updates. Meanwhile, enjoy these other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.